Are you a fan of 80s horror but want something different? Do you like modern horror but the regular magazines leave you a bit cold? Are you a fan of that schlocky horror that no one else seems to talk about? Check out Necronomicon, the UK horror zine from Etsy.com. Just search for Necro Neil. Hi, welcome to Witchy Wednesday with the Meandering Magical Podcast. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Neil.
And today's episode is all about health and magic. So if you joined us on our last episode, we kind of talked a little bit there in our summing up of 2022 about health and magic. And we kind of said then that we were going to talk about it in a future episode. Well, this is the future episode. So Neil, do you want to crack us off then today? What comes to mind when you're talking about health and magic? What does that sort of mean to you?
I suppose I just think about how, in the olden days, there would be some wise old lady in a shack who'd have all the natural medicines. That's kind of the things that would come to mind for me. But, now modern day, there's that balance of that kind of stuff that still has an influence in modern medicine. And then just kind of the witchcraft that you do for your own health as well.
I think for me, when we're talking about in the 21st century, I guess it's the 3 M's. So that is, I've written it down on the board here. It's meditation, mindfulness, and manifestation. And that seems to be a lot of what the newer generations are kind of talking about and focused on when it comes down to magic and certainly with health. It's that idea of, it's more about well-being and all of these sort of things, rather than it necessarily be about doing a spell to fix something. But I think you're right. I think it certainly within my practice, obviously I'm a bit more of a traditional, I come from more of a traditional background than you do. It is very much based on that wise woman with the, the little, you go, hello dear, come this way. And even to the point where in many cultures, I was watching something recently in Poland and places, there are still witchy, I think they're called witch whisperers or whispering witches, who still carry out traditional witchcraft for the purposes of healing. And patients go to them, and even like the doctors and the medical professionals in that area have been known to visit these whispering witches, because it's whether it's psychosomatic, whether it's actually spell work that's working, there is seen to be an actual upswing in health. And I think that's I would love to do a whole deep dive, and maybe one day, once everything is open again fully across the world and I've got the money to do it, I'd love to go and talk to some of these women and just basically go, what is it you do? Like how, why, how, like, because that feels very much like a living link to what we talk about as back in the olden days. So I'm fascinated by that. And I know in a lot of other cultures, it's still an active practice, it's an active sort of role is magic. So I do think, like, when I think of magic and health, especially after the year that I've had, again, go and check out our previous podcast if you want to know exactly what happened last year to both of us. But I really do think about things like herbalism and, crystals and things like that would have come to mind up until last year, and then everything changed. Is there anything within the sort of chaos traditions? Not that there are, it's chaotic, so it's not necessarily traditions. But what is there from that sort of field that kind of your go-to would have been, prior to this last year of growth for both of us?
I suppose if I try and rack my brains and think what traditional chaos magics magicians would think of to do with your health, I really don't know. But for myself, like over the last year and the ill health that I've had, it's kind of finding that line where leaving things to the professionals, but then thinking, what stage do I actually step in and do something?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think for a lot of people that come into the craft fairly new, they kind of want to reach out for their spell book at everything. It's kind of like, oh, I've got this problem. I'll run and make a poultice. Great. That's great, and that's very traditional, but you do realize the reason they stuck some old moss and bit of mud on there is because they didn't have access to antibiotics and paracetamol and all of these modern wonderful things. It's like I always say when I do the tarot readings on the live stream. By the way, if you haven't already, do subscribe to Beyond Authentic Witchcraft on YouTube, because I do a live stream each and every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. with free tarot readings. So if you want to be part of that, come and join me. But I always say, I know I had to get that plug in, but I always say on that, like, if you break your arm, don't go running for a crystal. Like, go to the hospital, get it put in a cast, and then get the crystals to help the healing and do some, you know, wave your hands and do all the magic-y stuff. It's not going to mend itself. If you've got a bone sticking out of your arm at 90 degrees and it's blooping blood everywhere, probably not a good idea to reach for the, you know, the hematite. Probably a better idea is to stick it in a cast, maybe cover the open wound, maybe like get some stitches or something, and then reach for the hematite and all of the herbs and crystals. Because again, it's that thing of, I think quite often, especially when you're new to the craft, you're so full of this like excitement of the things that it can do that, you know, you kind of go, right, I'm going to use I'm not going to use any modern medicine. I'm going to use all of this. And we kind of forget the fact that the reason all of the other stuff was used is because there wasn't any such thing as modern medicine. And even things like, you know, foxglove, which was a plant that was used to help with heart conditions. Now it's digitalis, which is made from foxglove, but it's a drug that directly linked from, you know, people back in the day, the wise women and the practitioners of the day, working out that this helped somehow. And then science coming in and saying, right, that's interesting. Let's study that. Let's see if there's a cause and effect, and let's see if this is repeatable. And oh, it is. And now what is the active ingredient that we can extract? And so I think for a lot of us, you do kind of get that thing of, oh, especially if it's a minor ailment, like that's fine. Like if you get a graze, we all know if you go past, you know, you're walking along in the summer months, you're in a short skirt or a pair of shorts, and you walk past some stinging nettles, grab a dock leaf, rub that on. We all know that it's like an old wives' tale, but it works. But if you are walking along and you fall down a whale and both of your knees go, and you know what I mean, you're like something out of some weird body horror sort of video, like some of the stuff that you write about in Necronomicon. If you're in that kind of position, don't just like cast a spell. Maybe ring 999 or 911. Maybe do that bit later. And I think that, you know, for me, it's when we talk about health and magic, it is about combining those energies. It's about working with modern science and modern medicine and trying to improve the odds that it's going to work. And certainly last year, that's something I had to experience.
Well, yeah, it's just about tipping the universe a bit, you know, kind of, that's all it is. It's not going to, you know, stop you bleeding out, but it's, get yourself to the hospital and maybe do something on the way, just so that it all runs smoothly. I mean, the worst it can do is it can get you into a better headspace to deal with it. So
yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of what we think of these days as traditional medicine is stuff that, yes, some of it is still works for various reasons, but some of it has been usurped by modern medicine because it's evolved into that. And sometimes I think, and I hear on quite a few forums and things, you'll see people posting and they're like, oh, I don't trust modern medicine, I don't trust modern doctors. And it's like, yes, there are, you know, things to be said about modern pharmaceutical practices and how they work, and do we genuinely need all the pills that we're paying for every single day and all of that. But also, like, I'm not being funny, I'm incredibly grateful to modern medicine. I you know, currently don't have cancer because of modern medicine, and there isn't a Bladderwick or a poultice that would have done that in the same amount of time in the same way. So as much as I used, you know, some of my own magical experience and magical energies to help, I very much put my faith in the hands of the surgeons and the training and the equipment in the hospital, and then kind of try to tip the scales in my favor a little bit magically.
Do you kind of do regular magic to keep yourself in good health, or like say with the cancer, did you kind of have to just make and do and come up with, you know, as you went along?
A bit of both, to be honest. It was a bit of both. So if I switch to this, if I show you a little bit behind the scenes, just here in this cabinet, if I can move this out of the way. If you're squeamish, by the way, if you're watching this on the video, if you're squeamish, maybe look away for a second or two. If you are listening to this on the podcast, on the audio podcast, then I'll describe what I'm holding. So I'm holding it's actually basil. It's a herb pot, and it probably came from Aldi. It's just a little pot of herbs, but it's empty. It's not got herbs in it. It's wrapped with some cling film, and it's got a very dark, very icky looking fluid in it. And this is actually a jar of my cancer. So when I had surgery, one of the things that they do when they remove the cancer, the scarring, you have to pee it out, and some of it I managed to capture. So this is a mix of, unfortunately, my pee and some of the cancer cells that came out of me. And there's a reason that I've got this. It's because it's trapped, and it was trapped in this bottle, and it's never going to be opened. But here I have the cancer. I have this in my hand. Therefore, if it's here, it can't kind of come back. And it's one of those things that, you know, this is, it's a really personal thing, obviously, because this was in and of me. But whilst I have this, like, if it's going to come back, it has to do it in a different area, in a different locale, and all of this stuff, because I've got it, it's captured. And like the idea of the cancer, like, I don't know, it's a really strange thing, because like it just can't, I'm not going to let it return, because I've got it, I've captured it. And it feels very much, it's a very bizarre thing, and it's a bizarre thing to have in your cabinet of curiosities.
I mean, I understand that, because I've kind of done similar things, like after when I've had surgeries and things, where I've done kind of almost like a sympathetic kind of magic, where I've taken remains like stitches and things like that, and it's almost like a way of just kind of owning it and not letting it out and return. And, you know, but do you tend to do things in preparation for surgery, like with the cancer? Like, did you do things beforehand rather than anything after?
I love the fact you're asking when you absolutely know the answer. So yes, I did. So
you never told me.
There was some preparation that I did. Yes, I did. There was some preparation that I did before the actual surgery itself. So I'm holding this box, so this is obviously like, oh, it's a box of secrets. There were some practical things that I did, and there was some more esoteric things that I did. So from a practical perspective, I basically went in all guns blazing. I decided that I was going in for surgery, and I was going to go in absolutely spiritually minded and absolutely like working the magics like never before, because I kind of thought, look, I'm you know, I believe in modern medicine and the wonders of modern science and all of that, but let's give it as much of a push as I possibly can. Let's give it a helping hand. So I went in with this magical box, and it's, to this day, it's the only thing I've used this box for. It will sit on the side. I will sometimes, you know, stick tarot cards on a little thing on front of it, but this box is now only ever used for this, because if I ever need to go back in again, this is what this box is now for. It's my surgery box, if you like. And when I open it up, it's got all sorts of bits in, not a lot of bits, but it did have some other, a couple of herbs in it, but they've gone to the wayside. So this little disc has, is a disc that Rufus sort of made from pyrography. And so it's got the pentacle on it, absolutely fine. But this little symbol around it, although it looks like almost like clouds, which is another one that he's done, this is actually water. Now, the reason it's water is because the bladder is to deal with pee and to deal with water, and so this went in with me as a kind of, almost like as a mini altar space. I didn't want to take in my actual, you know, my mini altar that I've got here, but I wanted something that to give me kind of like a working space, if you like. And then also in here, there's some weird things. So I decided, bearing in mind this was the first time I've ever undergone any surgery, and it's the first time I've been in hospital since I was 6 weeks old. So I decided to take in the Grim Reaper. So these are earrings, and as I was being wheeled down for surgery, I had the Grim Reaper in, and to be fair, the nurses were like, you might need to take your earrings out. And I was like, no, I'm taking the Grim Reaper with me. And the idea being that if I've got the Grim Reaper hanging off my ears, I know where he is at all times. So he can't sneak up behind me because I've got the representation. And again, a bit like capturing the cancer in my cabinet, I'd captured the essence of the Grim Reaper by having these with me. And it was like, no, I ain't about to die on that operating table. Like, whatever's to come, that is not going to happen. And so these were literally, and they weren't bought for this purpose, but now they are expressly for surgical purposes. And so, so I have the Grim Reaper, because it was, again, that idea of, no, not today, Grim. This is what's going in. Like, I've got you, and while I've got this, I'm not about to, like, you can't sneak up behind me. And then I also have this necklace which I put together. Now I am going to eventually go back to having an online shop, and I'm going to make a version of these, maybe not quite as dark as this, dark in inverted terms, but this is a I don't know what I would call it, a mojo necklace, I guess. And it's got all sorts of weird, I mean, it's got a bit of my hair on it there. Look, just pull that off. But it's got all sorts on it. So we have a crow's foot, because crows are something which are incredibly important to me, my working. I mean, I've got Magick just there, look. And crows are something, even in the cabinet, I've got crow's feet. They're just something which has always spoken to me. And this particular claw, if I hold it like that, look, you can see, look how sharp and pointy it is. So again, this is something that I was wearing before surgery and put on after surgery. I couldn't unfortunately wear it during surgery. But the idea is that this is, the crows for me, ravens, corvids, are like a spirit animal. So they're something which are deeply important to me. They're the messenger for me that go between worlds and all of that. I've got a crow tattoo that happened after the first lot of surgeries. And so that is something that is deeply meaningful. And it just sits there on my necklace, just literally sort of same sort of place where this does now. We've got there's a cork. So that used to have a bottle, a little glass bottle with amethyst chips in. Again, talking about healing energy. Amethyst for me is a very positive healing energy crystal. And so I had little tiny chips that I took in with me. That has since broken, which says an awful lot. Maybe the working was done. Maybe the energy was completely depleted from it. There's a little bit of rose quartz there. There's a ratty bone, so a leg bone from a rat. Why have I got a bone? By the way, all of these were wired in. I wired all of these by hand. So there's a ratty bone. So up until a few weeks back, we had rats. We had pet rats, lots of pet rats at one point, and we rescued them. And so rats are incredibly intelligent, and they are. People talk about at the end of the world, there'll be cockroaches. No. The end of the world, there'll be rats, because rats find a way. Like they grow in urban situations, they grow bigger than they've ever done in the wild, because they've got access to food. They are incredibly intelligent. They're almost as intelligent as crows. You can train them to do tricks and things like you can with dogs and other animals. They are very, very intelligent. And this was an unknown member of one of our ratteries that had passed away, and we had buried in pots in the garden. And then over last year, over the summer months, we were replanting plants as they died off, and quite a few of the remains had been just completely gone. They just evolved and dissolved into the ground. But some of the leg bones and some of the jaw bones hadn't, some of the skulls hadn't. And for me, legs are about running. They're about standing tall. They're about, they've got lots of iconography about it. And rats are incredibly adaptive. And so again, that's there as an incredibly adaptive element. It reminds me of that, ability to kind of go with the flow and learn. But also, this would have been one of our ratty friends. This would have been something that we had cared for and lived with, and it's kind of like almost like a familiar coming with. So again, this is a very liminal necklace. I've got a hagstone, which has an awful lot of traditional sort of meanings in terms of gateways, in terms of liminal spaces. So if you don't know, a hagstone is literally just a stone with a hole in it, quite often done through the sea, where it will just cause a hole. So people use hagstones, or traditionally they're used to create portals, to create energy vortexes, to kind of like you create a load of energy over here and you send it through the hagstone, and somebody, so I could send you a hagstone, and then the idea being that I could create a massive working over here, and metaphysically through the quantum, through the ether, through the Akashic field, it would teleport across to you, and that energy would come through the gateway at your end. So again, it's sort of talking about gateway and liminal spaces and being between life and death. There's also a quite a traditional pent with a couple of little jangly balls on. I don't know whether you can see that there, little sort of, hang on, there you go, silver tone pentacle. And then finally there's this sort of weird little bit of wired bone, sort of, they're beads, but they look almost skeletal. So one almost looks like an alien skeleton, an alien head, alien skull, and then there's 2 dice, because again, rolling the dice, it was taking chance, and if I've got it with me, then I am rolling the dice myself, but I'm kind of in control of that twist of fate. And then there's an obsidian bead on the bottom, and the obsidian is again quite another good dark healing stone. So this was kind of like the dark liminal side of me coming out and basically saying, look, I don't mind standing on the cusp of death. I don't mind like living in that space in between, but if I've got any control over it, I don't want to pass that over right now, not ready to go yet. So therefore, let's take control. And just by having it all on a nice dingly dangly necklace, which jingles quite nicely, it was just kind of a way of imposing my will on the surgery and trying to bring with me elements of my own belief and my own folk magic. A lot of this is very folk magic-y. So yeah, so that was kind of what I had prepared. And again, because this was quite a long process of making this and putting the jewelry together and wiring everything up, all of the links are silver tone, all of the wires are black. So again, it's working on that liminal sort of imagery. And as I was winding it, as I was making it, I was very much talking about and thinking about what I was doing it for. So the entire process of making that necklace was all about the surgery and all about defeating the cancer, and about, look, I'm okay to stand in between life and death. I'm okay to be in that grey space between the candle and the star. I'm fine with that. I'm not ready to cross over yet. So if this is just kind of like sticking a pause in that journey, then that's what we need to do. So yeah, so that whole box kind of went with me and was on my bedside. And I think, if I remember rightly, I even did a live stream from the bedside where this was like literally sat on the side next to me. So yeah, so that was going on in a practical sense, but there's more that I did behind the scenes, but we'll maybe talk about that in a bit. So what about you? I mean, you had a bit of a rough year in terms of health last year as well. We talked about that in last week's in the last podcast. Did you do any sort of practical workings? Did you do, you know, what magical oomph, what magical kick did you do?
I mean, I tend to like, I've had a lot of different surgeries in my life, and I tend to have a lot of, I don't really do anything massively ahead. I just kind of do things shortly before, but I tend to do like sigils, visualizations, have kind of like a playlist, you know, I'll kind of really build myself up in that kind of moment of waiting. And obviously you've got to like fast, and so it kind of puts you in a very strange betweeny state as you're waiting. And then what I do and what I did was, as you kind of laid there and the anesthesia's kicking in, I mean, I always like trying to fight it. So I kind of hold the image of whatever sigil or what I've created to do with the surgery going well in my mind, as I'm just kind of fighting the anesthesia, and then obviously it takes me, and then I see that as kind of it launched. So I tend to really like that, using an altered state to get shit done, basically. But yeah, I think that's about it, because I mean, I don't really do anything on the regular, or it's, you know, like last year it was, I mean, it was a case of, I mean, 'cause like you were saying about how doing magic for really simple ailments, like for instance, if you were to do one for like to cure a cold or something.
Mhm.
But the thing is that it depends how important it is to you. Like last year, I was like getting over a chest infection and then COVID and another chest infection, and with it, like I wanted my COVID test to be positive, and I want the chest infection to clear up before I had something due in a couple of days that I was really looking forward to. So in that space, I went, this is important, rather than kind of waiting it out. I was like, but I really, really need this to go. You know, I can take all the stuff that I need, modern medicine, but so it wasn't really about curing it. It was just kind of, you know, speeding it up, because it was like, well, I'm not going to just do some magic and then I wake up and like, oh, cured, or oh, my test's fine, or you know, it was more about making something kind of hurry up rather than you know, I wasn't just doing it just to, you know, I wasn't like avoiding my medication. You know, it was just more of a helping it along with magic, really. So
I think
yeah.
that's I think that's really important, because again, online, on some of the online forums, you'll hear people saying, you know, oh, I'm not going to take XYZ medication that they need because they're going to do it magically instead. And it's like,
Mm,
no. It's a bit like when people say, oh, laughter is the best medicine. Well, great. But if you're diabetic, maybe take your insulin and then have a bloody good laugh. That'll make you feel better. But actually, your insulin's going to keep you alive. So I found it really interesting, because before I had my surgery, obviously we'd been speaking about stuff, and you said about this idea of like trying to hold off as you do that count down from 10, and they're going 10, 9, and I was like, so I did that when I had the
mm,
first surgery. I was doing that, and I was properly like, do you know what, I'm going to fight as much as I possibly can to stay conscious, to then get to the very last second and then trigger
yeah.
what for me became tank, and it became
Mm.
another egregore servitor thought form, which, if you've watched this podcast or listened to this podcast for a while, we've talked about egregores, thought forms, servitors for quite a bit in the generic, and all we said, it will come to a future episode. It will. We're going to be working on that, maybe for the next one, maybe the one after, but it will definitely be coming up soon. But yeah, there was this sort of this element of me kind of going, right, Neil said that he launches sigils this way, so maybe if I can hold on, I'm going to hold on, I'm going to hold on, and I'm going under them. No, I'm just going, and now I'm going to release the dragon energy, and we'll see what happens. So yeah, thank you for that, because it was one of those things I hadn't even thought about up until that point. Although I'm going to go into it in full detail in another episode, I guess this is a good point to talk about tank and what tank is, and because, you know, people have heard me mention it maybe on the tarot streams. So when I do the tarot streams on a Sunday evening, I work with quite elemental energy, and over the years I've come to understand and kind of incorporate that energy into the form of dragons. Now that's just like a visual, I guess, a visual modifier, a visual code for the energy,
Mm.
so that I can kind of grasp it in my imagination, and in my brain isn't functioning. I needed to burp. But that's just kind of a way that I can grasp and conceptualize the energies and how I work with them. So I always had 4. Well, initially I had 1, and then that was a servitor egregore that spawned the other 3,
Mm.
and they came in. So it was always a form of a dragon, because I've been very, very closely linked to dragon energy since I was a kid. So I always had a dragon type energy or type essence that was around me.
Mm.
And the first one was very much, he's now dubbed Rocky on the channel, but it was very like solid earth, ancient rock type energy. And slowly, bit by bit, that evolved, and there were offshoots of him that became sort of linked with the other elements. But the one that was always missing was who we now refer to as tank, which is that very much green, a healing energy. So each of the dragons have different colors, they have different feels. When I'm working with them in tarot, each of the dragons come up, the elemental energies come up separately. And because I knew that this surgery was coming up, I kind of actively created an offshoot of Rocky to become the 5th dragon, and to purposely kind of shift Rocky from being the earth elemental to being what he always was, which was the spirit elemental, the closest connection I have with to the universal energy. And so that left this gap for earth energy. Now, for me, when I talk about healing, I talk about, for me, it means green. It's earth. It's that natural Gaiac energy, the planetary Gaia. It's that Gaiac energy, that Diana energy, that very close sort of deep-rooted earthbound energy. And so I didn't have a particular connection. I didn't have a particular dragon that had that essence. And so prior to surgery, there was a lot of work involved in creating and offshooting Tank from the main sort of dragon energy into its own thing, into his own thing. And again, we'll talk about the creation process and what it all means in a future episode. But basically, once that thought form had been created, his whole purpose was to help heal. And so when I went into surgery, yes, I had all these other bits and pieces, the physical, but as I was, closing my eyes and going under, and I was sort of very mindful of the fact that what happens if I die on the operating table? I don't think I'm going to, but blah, 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 blah. It was that countdown process. The final thing was release Tank. Like, this is your moment to go and do what you need to do. And I believe very firmly that the success that the surgeries had was aided by Tank, and just the fact that the creation of Tank, the energy, the sort of personification, was this wartime healer. So it wasn't almost like the war doctor from Doctor Who, but it was like a field medic. It was like yes, you've got all of the technology and all of the skills, but do whatever you need to do in the circumstances to get the right result. And if that means kind of doing things that are, if you've got to burn away a whole massive chunk of the bladder to get rid of the cancer, then do it. Like if you've got to chop bits of the bladder out to get rid of the cancer, do it. Like, whatever is necessary in that moment as a field medic, kind of do it. And so for me, all of that imagery came together to create this new thought form. And whatever, I can't say for certain that Tank cured me. I can't say for certain that he had any kind of influence. All I know is that the surgeries helped. But a little while later, you had a surgery and you kind of got Tank as well.
Yeah, I had some surgery in the year, and you said, "Oh, I'll lend you Tank," and I was like, all right, because I was thinking, oh shit, if Tank goes from you, what's going to happen to you? But he came to me. I wasn't sure in what way, because it's obviously I don't have experience working with your dragons, but I came through that surgery fine, and I was like, that was a really nice thing that you did. And I think after a while, I went, oh shit, do I still have him then? And you were like, no, he's back. Oh no, he's come back. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine then.
But not straight after the surgery. That was the interesting thing, because it's like at the moment he's very much powered down. So like he's still around, he's still there. It's like the other dragons. It's like Rocky. Like the first dragon, like he only ever opens his eye, and it's literally the sound almost that I get. I really do sound insane now. I was talking about this, but anyway, I kind of knew that he wasn't going to come straight back afterwards, because he's there whilst he's needed, and when he's not needed, it literally is that metaphor of if you're in the middle of a war zone, you send out the medics when you've got people that are injured that can be revived. You don't send them out when everyone's dead. You don't send them out when before anyone's shot. You send them out, pick up the wounded, get your ass back into safety. And if on the way back, whilst you're in the armored tank, you need to sear somebody's leg that's been blown off, you do that. You save them whilst you can, and deal with the consequences when you're back into like gorgeous glowing medical hospital. And it's the same principle with Tank. So when you've had surgery, it was like it took a little while before I was like, okay, I think he's back around, but he's very powered down at the moment. And again, it's a bit like with Rocky. The way the elemental energies work, and the way I work with them, is they only really are there when they're needed. So they're not all around all the time. And certainly if you've watched on the tarot streams, you'll see that the one that tends to come across most on the tarot stream is Wispy, which is an air elemental. And it's really interesting that when the connotations with air are with thought and with lots of, you know, psychic and the ether and all of these things, and that's the dragon that appears the most. So that's really interesting. But Tank is still around, and he's still kind of powered down, but he's designed to be used when he's needed. The fact that that energy isn't about is literally a good sign, because it means he's not needed right now. And so, yeah, so again, it's really esoteric. It's really kind of out there. It's higher magic, chaos magic. If you are watching this or listening to this and you don't have experience of that, you'll probably think that, you know, I've gone way off the rails and have tumbled down the rabbit hole. But again, it's something that seems to have tipped the scales in the balance. And again, we've got no proof. Neither of us have got any proof that you know, an elemental dragon was at either of our surgeries guiding the hands of the surgeons or the heat. We've got no proof of that. But in the same way, other people have no proof if they pray to their deity, their god or their gods. They've got no proof either, but they put that belief out there, and then when they heal, they give that faith and that acknowledgement, if you like.
But yeah, I mean, I kind of helped you as well through your surgery, because a message one night where you said, "Can you do something for me?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I kind of
you'll have to remind me, because a lot of the time when I was in hospital, there were some very good drugs. There were some very good drugs, and B, there was some very difficult post-surgery mess ups that the nurses had done. So that wasn't down to the surgeons, it was down to the nursing care I had afterwards. But yeah, just remind me.
I mean, I don't know how much details you want out there, but it was just to do with someone who's been very difficult around you, and you said, "Can you keep this person away?" And
I know who you mean. You mean the transphobic nurse who was horrendous to me, and who, so there was an incident where a nurse came in. I had a catheter bag that was overflowing and lots of it, and basically the nurse didn't want to touch me with a 10-foot barge pole, and I needed that nurse not to be around my care anymore. That was the situation.
So yeah, I mean, we were kind of throwing things each other's way, which was quite nice. I mean that's the thing. It's, you know, I mean, apart from us two, it's like, have you been asked, or have you done magic for other people's health?
Yes and yes. So this is a puppet that I've made. This is me in my bra and knickers. Yes, it's green. Yes, I look like She-Hulk. And yes, it's quite a manly sort of figure, because, you know, trans. So this is being created for me for a particular purpose: weight loss, moving forward into this year, because that's my main health goal this year. So what a puppet is, if you're listening to this on the podcast, this is a rough-ish kind of gingerbread person type outline that I have drawn onto some green felt, cut out. Rather weirdly, it's got angles and things that, you know, human bodies don't have. And then I've stitched it together, and this is filled with random stuff. So there's, you know, hair in here from my hairbrush. There's also nail clippings. So this has kind of got an essence of me within it. So this one is representing me and is all linked in, and there's a piece of paper scrolled, so rolled up into here, with the essence of what this puppet is for, which is generally for weight loss. But just behind here, behind me, behind that unit, is another one in a darker green, with a gingery beard and gingery hair that represents my other half, Rufus. And that again is for weight loss, and for healthy weight loss, because again, it's all well and good putting something out into the ether saying, oh, I want to lose weight, but the universe can take things in ways you don't expect. So if you just say, I want to lose weight, well, you could get, you know, serious cancer, or you could get some, you know, amoebic dysentery and be horrendously ill for 3 months. You know, there's all these things that you can, that it can manifest in ways that
Yeah.
you're not prepared for. So for this puppet and the other one that I created, there's lots of caveats and things involved in the
Yeah,
work.
that's it. I mean, that's why I think you kind of have to have permission from that person, because you want them to kind of be in control, because it's like way in the early years of me doing witchcraft, I did something for my friend who I didn't ask, and it went absolutely terrible, like really bad. And it's like since then, I've kind of learned the lesson to like ask, because there might be some little nuances that
Mhm.
you presume that, oh well, I'll do it so it includes this and all that, you know. And I think it was like you'd I mean, because I'm really into cross stitching sigils, and I
Yeah.
like doing them for other people. And I said, I don't know whether or not it was me that suggested, like, oh well, can I do you a cross stitch sigil for weight loss?
Mhm.
And it was, you know, I spend a lot of time kind of perfecting it so that it doesn't monkey paw in that way, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it is important. I mean, for me personally, I think to get permission from people to do these things. I mean,
Yeah. Absolutely.
have you done it where you've given other people instructions rather than you actually doing it yourself?
I have done. I mean, again, in the quite often on a Sunday now, it's very much focused on tarot, but beforehand, we would kind of have a self-care bit before we got on with the tarot, and that self-care bit we would sometimes do rituals, and even now sometimes we do rituals, and I'll sort of almost instruct or do some guidelines on
Mm,
a ritual. In fact, at the end of this podcast, I think you've prepared something and I've prepared
mm,
something as a little kind of a little learning tool, a little show and tell, if you like, of some basic rituals. So yeah, I've done things like that. I haven't really done it in terms of with other practitioners, because it's kind of like if somebody asks me, you know, what would you do for healing, I'll say, oh, I would do XYZ, these are the colors that work for me, this is what works for me, but you do you. Because again, a lot of the things, I mean, a lot of the things I've got around me, I've got green. Hang on, if I go to the full screen, I've got a candle just up there that's a green candle, there's a green bowl, I've got a green lighter. I've written down some things with a green pen. I'm wearing green eyeshadow because I knew that, you know, we'd be doing elements of this today. And so for me, green is all about healing, because it's that, again, talking about tank, it's that earth energy, that Gaia energy. For a lot of people in other cultures or in other systems, green represents money
mm.
because the dollar bill is green. But that I don't have that connection, because in this country, the lowest denominator note is green. Everything else is like browns and reds and purples and all the rest of it. So it's kind of like if you're using green, well, that's the smallest amount of money you can get in a note. So
Mm,
it doesn't really work. So yeah. So I'm always very mindful about instructing other people in how I do
mm.
something, because again, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for anybody else. And again, what works for me has adapted and been adapted and evolved over the years, from bits and pieces I've acquired from
Yeah.
books, from, you know, working with other groups and things. Um,
Yeah,
so
because it was
yeah.
like there's like things that I've suggested for people where I know, for instance, like say I know someone who might be really into crystals and have a lot of crystals around the house, but
Mhm.
is a bit spiritual, but not witchy or anything like that. Whereas me, I'm not into crystals, so if I'm going to instruct someone on something, I'm going to take the things that they believe and have faith in and kind of say, well, you believe in that, so I'll do something that you can use.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you to use my methods because you might not believe in it. And so then stuff won't work, you know. So I like to kind of tailor things for people who have asked, hey, you're a bit witchy. Well, what would happen, you know, if I did this? And so, you know, I'm quite into that. I quite like that kind of uh, people having the personal ways of doing things. Like you say, I feel like I always associate green with health as well.
So what about then if you're feeling really ill, like if you're feeling really poorly, obviously we've talked about colds and sort of emergency situations and things like that, but what happens if you're just, say, if you're really depressed, or if you're really, like for my fibro, if my fibro is playing up, everything hurts, everything's a slog, like getting out of bed hurts, going for a wee hurts, the whole process hurts. So would you, if you're feeling particularly ill, would you recommend doing magic to feel better? Like, what's your take on that? Because I know there's a bit of a controversy within the craft.
I think there is pros and cons, I think. I mean, in general, if you're really, really ill, I don't think it's kind of wise to start going, oh, what can I do magically? It's like best to kind of let yourself heal. But I mean, if you've got any kind of illness that leaves you with low energy, I don't see why you should sap more of that energy out of you to do something. But for instance, with me, like if I've been in a mass amount of pain, then I might actually use that state as a form of gnosis for something. So it's kind of pros and cons, really. I mean, I suppose I just think about illness can kind of distort your perception a bit. Like if you are really sluggish and tired, or if you are suffering from depression or whatever, it's like your mind's not properly aligned with the best way that you could probably do something to help that. I think like that's what I think. I think you've got to kind of watch, you know, you might, you know, if you're not in good health, then you might leave some stuff out that you would have done if you were fully, you know, awake and aware and had the energy and to make it work. So I think for me, I think it's a bit of a tricky area, really. It's going to be really different for everyone, I think, to know when is a good and bad time to do it.
I think for me, it's one of those things where if you are just using magic when you are poorly, then do you have the kind of shortcuts? Because we've talked about shortcuts in the past. It's like, yes, magic, to work magic properly, you've got to build up energy and all of those things. And that kind of comes with experience. And again, it's this idea of, if you take vitamin C, for instance, right? And you only ever have vitamin C when you've got a cold, it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. If you take it every single day and you're taking you're either taking a multivitamin, or you're making sure you've got lots of healthy fruit and veg in your diet and all of that, and you are nutritionally sound, then the vitamin C will have that effect. It will help you fight off colds and things. But if you're only taking a vitamin C tablet when you've already got a cold, it's kind of too late. And it's a bit like that with magic. It's like if you're actively working all the time and you're around the magical energies, and you're able to circle cast, or whatever you do, you're able to, build a tower or cone of energy or cone of power, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever works for you. If you're able to do that on a regular basis, then when you need that healing, you've kind of got those shortcuts in place. You can kind of go, right, I don't have a lot of excess energy right now, but maybe I can tap into the earth's energy and I can pull up from the earth that energy, or I can tap into, visualizing the universal energy, the Gaia energy around the earth is something I tend to pull, and pull that energy down through the crown chakra. Again, I don't really work with a lot of chakras, but I know the bits I need to know. To pull that energy down, to build that energy from within, to kind of power the working. But then there's also been times where I've been so poorly that, as you say, all I can do is sleep. Like, yes, a working right now would probably help, and yes, a working right now would probably, help me heal a little bit faster and fight off whatever bugger it is I've got. But you know what? I just need to sleep. I just need to, have the chicken soup for the soul. I just need to, cuddle up in my covers and feel poorly and get Rufus to bring me a cup of tea and go, oh, thank you very much. Right, I'll be out soon. You know what I mean? And sometimes that is as much of a magical practice that we can manage, is just to listen to our own bodies in that way. What happens, or have you ever experienced it where magic can make you ill?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that, I mean, it was something that I said to you before. I was like, I'm not going to talk about this. But then I realized that since I was diagnosed in my mid-20s, I've always been very open about it in Necro, and I've talked about it in other podcasts. And so I was like, why not? But I have bipolar disorder, and for me, I know that, especially when I'm manic, because I'm prone to psychosis, I will not practice magic. And I kind of learnt that the hard way, because around the time I was diagnosed, I was working with the IoT, and part of the magical training was very intense. And it's not good when you're kind of suffering from kind of psychosis and delusions of grandeur and everything. But around that time, that's when I read Condensed Chaos by Phil Hine, and he talks about, I can't remember how he phrased it, something like the magical failings or the magical tragedies or something. And he puts it as like, there's different categories where if you do too much magic, there's, I think one is isolation, which is basically you have no perception of other people's ideas. One is paranoia, where you start believing that maybe there's other people working against you. There's obsession, which kind of, says it all. You get too obsessed with magic. A great one is called magicitis, where, again, delusions of grandeur. Like if you are prone to that, then when you have magicitis, it's believing that you're the all-knowing, greatest magician ever, and you think that you're all powerful. Cosmic tragedy is another one, where you believe that any magic that you do is monkey pawed and upset the universe or people around you in some way. You get kind of you feel very guilty for what you're doing. And I think the last is Gnostic burnout, which is basically from just doing too much magic, putting too much energy into it and just kind of wearing yourself out. And that, what Phil Hine wrote there, just kind of really hit me. And I thought, yeah. And it was kind of during my training where, I kind of went, I've got to take a step back from this because it is affecting me on pretty much every level. So now I know that, when I'm edging towards that end of, manic depression, like the mania side, then I know that if I start doing magic and get too carried away with it, then I will end up kind of, my reality will get distorted in a way that isn't fun for anyone. So I don't do it. But yeah, in that way, kind of magic has the potential to make me ill. But I don't know whether or not you've had experiences where, especially kind of with the cancer journey, like, has it kind of made you ill, like as things kind of, energy's been sucked from you by doing magic, or is it you've done something and it's backfired or anything like that?
I guess not in that way, more in the way that because so much of my identity at its core is this belief that magic is real and that we have certain people among us, stroke everybody can, just certain people choose to have the ability to alter events somehow, and how I still don't understand, and I don't think any of us ever will until science catches up and we kind of have a quantum mechanics sort of grand theory of why things operate in the way they do. And the reason I keep coming back to quantum mechanics is because if the expectations of an experimenter can affect the experiment, as has been proven in quantum mechanics, that to me is exactly what we do as magicians, as magical workers. Our expectation of an outcome changes that outcome, which is exactly what quantum mechanics has seen and proven. And so, like, until there's a lot more, and I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetimes, unfortunately, but until there's a lot more research done into that and a lot more discovery, kind of how it works, I don't know. But I do know that for me, because that's a fundamental part of my being, when I got the result on the cystoscopy that basically said the cancer was back, that was I was so convinced, coming straight from Oakley, from the camp, like a week ago, I was so convinced that I was okay. I felt amazing. I felt healed. I felt like I was, clear. I felt like the cancer had gone. And so being told by the doctor that, it could be inflammation, but it looks like, in his experience, it looks like it could be, the signs of something trying to come back, and the early stages of pinpricks of like cells that are developing into cancer cells. That felt like such a denial of everything that I'd experienced through the surgeries, through the use of tank, through the use of all the visualization, through having the cancer in a jar, through the workings I've done at camp. It felt like all of that was then in my head and was just my imagination, because medical science was literally saying, look, it's back, like, believe what you want, here's the cancer. And that fucked me up. Like, there's no way around it. That made my mental health fall into the toilet, because the thing that had kept me going through the cancer journey was the fact that, not that I can heal myself, but the fact that I can at least help tip the scales. And at each new point of that journey, it was like, things are going well. Things like, whatever they're doing in terms of the NHS and the doctors and the specialists, I'm helping, and this is all, we're working together and we're getting the results. I was so convinced that we'd done it. And then to hear them say, you're wrong, it's back, and we're gonna find out in 3 months' time just how bad it is, and then schedule surgeries and blah blah blah. That was so soul destroying. It literally felt like my entire belief structure that had grown since childhood, and being with my nan and her talking about, the fact that her great grandmother or grandmother could see spirits and was a medium, and all the way through my entire life having that, these fundamental building blocks of who I am, basically, oh no, none of that's real because the cancer's back. That was really hard to deal with, which is then why it was even more hard to deal with when in November they went, oh no, there is no cancer, it's gone. And actually it might just have been a bit of inflammation. And then that was like, hang on a second, whoa, like, put the brakes on, comedy skids moment. It's like, you mean actually all this time it had worked? Okay, maybe. And then that was this moment where it's like, kind of believe in what I believe, like, have faith. And that's where that's a little bit dangerous for me. In all honesty, it's a little bit dangerous. And again, this isn't what I thought I was going to be talking about this evening, but that can almost lead to a little bit of hubris and this grandiose, you're having illusions of grandeur, because there is a certain element there now where I think I will probably distrust medical science and demand to see things with my own eyes and confirmation 3 times over, because they told me it was back and it wasn't. And I knew that it wasn't, but them telling me and being so sure made me second guess my, like, 40 years basically of magical influence was kind of puffed out of experience, out of reality. And then all of a sudden to find out that actually it was true and the cancer was gone, that kind of sudden reality check of everything coming back into place, that's really taken a while to deal with. It really has taken a while to deal with. So I don't think in terms of, I think that's my first real understanding, my first real experience of how being a practitioner, sort of being within the magical fields, can kind of really deeply impact my mental health. But not in the same way, obviously, that you've experienced, in the way that Phil Hines sort of describes. So it was strange. I do also know of people who, when they've been poorly, have tried to do lots of workings and lots of, you know, they've tried to literally run around for 5 hours and generate the energy that they need to cast a circle to do this, that and the other, and have made themselves physically ill in the process. And also I know of people that have been dealing with long-term health issues that kind of move aside the sort of the we talked about earlier, the medical guidance really, and they've moved that to one side and put their faith in magic alone, and I've seen that bite them on the backside numerous times. But yeah, I guess it's the first time I've experienced that. Yeah,
it's just interesting, the boundaries and the balance of modern medicine and practice, and just how they can work along and actually impact. And it's fascinating, especially what you've just talked about, how that made you actually question your practice. You know, it kind of made you ill in a very different way that probably no one's ever thought about. So
what it did, it took away something that has been part of me since my childhood. It literally, I can't describe it. The only thing I can describe it as, imagine that you're a massive Disney fan, right? Go with me on this. So you're a massive Disney fan, you love all the princesses and you absolutely love it, and it's real to you. And the idea of going to, you know, Disney World or something, it's real. You're growing up and these are princesses and they are this like otherworldly experience, and then you go to a park and you see, you know, a princess, you see Moana, and she's one of these like big head characters, and then you see behind the scenes where she's got the head off and it's just a bloke having a fag, you know what I mean? And it's like that, looking behind the curtain, that Wizard of Oz moment where, you know, they go and they travel this massive epic journey and they get to the Emerald City and they go and they find this glowing, like weird glowing mysterious head in the sky, and it's talking to them, and then Toto comes along and pulls the curtain aside and it's just an old man with a machine working gears. That kind of shift, that took away magic for me for a while, even though in the back of my head I was like, no, this doesn't, this still feels right. I'm still getting results with tarot. This is still like, how can this tarot stuff be developing? How can this, I still have this strong connection? And yet on the other side, you're telling me that everything I believed happened through the surgeries wasn't, and the cancer was still there. So there was just this cognitive dissonance where on the one hand I believed very firmly that magic was still real and I could experience it with the tarot and everything else, and the dragons were still there, and yet on the other hand I had this other belief that actually none of that could be real because the cancer was back. So yeah, that was tough. That was a tough 3 months, I've got to say.
Challenging to your beliefs, just a real test. But I think it's you know, you kind of think, well, if I permanently do magic, then something will eventually work. It's almost like an impatience where sometimes you do magic and it takes a long time. You know, you just got to persist and trust that it will work, you know?
So we've talked a lot there about our own experiences with health and magic and covered a hell of a lot of topics there, really. But I guess if you're watching this or if you're listening to this, it may well be because you yourself are either feeling under the weather, or there's somebody that you want to help, or in some way you want to learn more about how you can use magic to help your health. So we've actually put together a couple of little mine's kind of basic. I don't know about yours, Neil, but
mine's super basic. I'm going to out basic you.
Fantastic. Even better. So we've got a couple of workings. For workings, read spells, read like magical practice, any form, prayer, whatever form you want to put it into that works for you. So I guess I'm going to go first. So I'll go to the one shot so people can actually see me a little bit clearer. So for me, as we talked about earlier, green means for me healing. It talks about all of that lovely vitality, that energy, that earth, wonderful essence of spring, all of that-ness. It's not a word, but you know, go with it. So I've got a little working here, and for this working spell, all you're going to need is some paper. Preferably, again, if green for you doesn't mean healing, maybe orange works better for you, maybe red works better for you, whatever your color correspondences are, whatever. When you think of healing energy, what does that mean for you? Use those colors, use that correspondences. So for me, it's very much green. So I've got a green pen, I've got a green lighter, and I've got a green candle, and I've got a bowl with some water in, just in case things go a bit tits up on the stream. So if I need to extinguish anything, extinguish, then I've got a little bowl here, which is a green cauldron with some, it's only from like Poundland, but it says on it spooky spells. It's a little green bowl cauldrony thing, but it's green. So again, using all of that imagery. I've also got some peppermint oil. Peppermint is one of those oils that a lot of people, when you look at correspondences for herbalism and for aromatherapy, peppermint is up there quite often as a healing oil. If you haven't got it, tea tree works just as well, as does lavender. If you haven't got any of those, just use the paper. It's not necessary to have all these gubbins. I'm just going to rest the candle just on there like so, right in front of me. So all I'm going to do is anoint the candle. Now if you don't know what that means, it's basically fancy words for slap a bit of oil on it. Now if you haven't got the oil, kind of, you can run your hand up and down like this to charge it with energy. Do you need a new candle? Well, you can see this isn't a new candle, so no. Do you need to have a beeswax candle that's been, you know, hand rolled on the thighs of a virgin, brought down from the Magick? No, you don't. Just any old candle. And if you haven't got a green candle, use a white one, use a tea light, use whatever you've got. Just if you haven't even got a candle, just use a lighter. Like anything with flame will kind of suffice. This is about intent more than it is about having the gubbins. So if you do want to do it with the gubbins, I've got this, so peppermint oil. So I'm just going to put a couple of drops. I'm putting it directly on the wick, because then, as far as I'm concerned, that effectively puts it throughout the candle. I know that technically it doesn't, but it does. And I'm just going to put a couple of drops just on the candle itself, and then just a couple of drops on my finger and on my thumb. Why am I doing that? Because I'm going to slightly suggestively stroke the candle up and down in that manner. So just by anointing it. Now, as I'm doing this whole time, I'm thinking about the working that I'm doing. So I'm actually doing this for a particular person. I'm not going to name them, but I'm doing this for a particular person who is currently in hospital and a bit poorly. So as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about that person. I'm thinking about what they mean to me. I'm thinking about how I would like them to feel better, to have some healing, to have a better health outcome than they would without this working. Because that's what we're doing with Magick. We're trying to just, even if it's only 0.1% better, that's what I want them to feel at minimum. Hopefully they'll feel 100% better, and they'll be like, you know, doing a can in the next couple of weeks. It's not realistic. But I'm now going to light the candle. Now, for me, this smells amazing as well, by the way, the peppermint oil. So what I'm going to do now is just light the candle. Now, it might go a little bit whoppy as we do that because of the oil. As you can see, it doesn't want to quite light initially, but there we go. So now the candle is lit. And what I'm actually doing in my mind's eye, and you can see it's fizzing. Look at that bright. That looks amazing. The candle itself is fizzing with the oil hitting the wick and the wax, and it's creating its own energy. You can see here, look around the candle. You can see this field. That for me is like the magical energy of it. And you can see where it's sparking off in different things. That again, that is a visual representation of the magical energy. And it's amazing because in person, I can't see that. I can see it on the screen though. So you're seeing it how I'm envisaging it, which is phenomenal. So as this is lit and as it's burning, I am working with the idea of, bear in mind, this is a safe space. I don't need to cast a circle in this room because it's already cast. So I am working with this energy, and I am working with the fact that this light is the same light, it's the same energy that comes from the universe. Like we stand between the candle and the star, as they say on B5, and this energy, this healing, I'm envisaging being part of the universal cosmos. So this now is a healing candle. This is all being centered. The intent is that this is healing. Now on this piece of paper, I have got written the person's name in green. You can see from the other side. And I've got their name and their date of birth. And again, all I'm going to do is light. Before I do, I'm just going to, I've got it on one half of the piece of paper, so I'm going to tear down the middle. So I've only got it on what's necessary, because that was just covering up for privacy purposes. That other side was just covering up so you couldn't see much. I'm going to put a couple of drops of the oil on the paper. Hang on, is it coming out? No. Oh, there we go. A couple of drops there. And I'm literally putting it on the paper where that person's name is. And I'm just going to fold that up like so. As I'm doing this, again, I'm thinking of the person, I'm thinking of the situation they're in, I'm concentrating on my intent, which is for this person to feel better, to have healing, for the things they're going through in hospital to work for them. And now all I'm going to do is, again, this is one of the most basic and fundamental magical workings you can ever do. It's paper magic at its most. You can use a candle, paper, just burn the paper, and that's literally what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pop this just here in case I need to. Always have a bowl of water on standby just in case. And in fact, just because, oh, there we go. And in fact, just because I want to be super safe, I'm just going to use a bulldog clip just to hold the very edge of the paper, because I know from experience, the first time I ever did a paper working, I put a flammable liquid on the paper, and it was actually amyl nitrate poppers, and when I set that on fire, my hand caught fire. And there was this moment, again, I talked about it in the previous podcast about meeting Wayne and Hig. I waved my hand like this in the middle of this nightclub, and flames are falling from my hand as I'm doing this, trying to stop my hand from burning, which it didn't. There was this like arc of flame which kind of got their attention, which was kind of the purpose of that working. Don't really want to repeat that. I learned that the hard way. So because there is oil on here and because I've got oil on my fingers, I'm going to use the bulldog clip. Now, as I'm setting fire to this, bear in mind I don't have a smoke detector in this room. So I'm just setting fire to this. Now, why am I using fire for a healing working? Because it's the easiest way to send this energy out into the cosmos. And you can see, because of that oil, look how quickly that is burned. So as I'm doing this, that energy, that working is already gone. So now all that's left is some ash, but the smoke has already gone. Everything is gone. That has already passed into the ether. And now you can see there's some ash there. I'm just going to make sure that this is fully gone. The last scraps of the paper are gone. And yeah, they have. So I'm just going to tip that into there. Now, for me, what I would do is I'm just going to blow the ash away from the candle a little bit. Bits of the ash have anointed to the candle with the oil. That's absolutely fine. Again, it's one of those things you can't control how ash is going to react when you're dealing with this sort of thing. But now I'm going to leave this on here on the back of my on the back here, which is part of my, this hole is my working space, and I'm going to leave this to burn down. If you can't leave a candle to burn down because you know you live in a room where you're not, maybe you're not out of the broom closet, maybe you are somebody who can't leave candles, you know, burning, then you can blow it out. It's fine. Personally, for me, I like to use this candle. I like to use the energy, the heat, the glow from the candle to just keep sending that positive vibe and that working out for that person. So just before I move it, I'm just going to close my eyes for 2 seconds and just say in my mind, I'm just going to say the person's name. And the intent that I'm giving it. And then that is it. So that is all I'm going to do. And then this candle is going to come across here onto a safe place on the background there. And that's just going to burn out as we go through the rest of the podcast. And then eventually, if that's still burning at the end of the podcast, I will just allow that to burn out. And then that is it as far as I'm concerned. Now, once that has burnt, the working is done, the energy has been transferred, and hopefully in the days to come we'll see a positive result. So there you go. It's a very basic healing working. You don't just need to use it for healing. You can use the basics of that with the paper, the candle, and even the oils, whatever color correspondences work for you. If you were maybe doing a working to invigorate lust with you and your partner, for instance, because things have got a bit quiet, you might use red. Maybe you're wanting something to bring more fortune and luck into your world and some more money, so you might use gold, and you might anoint it with whatever herbs or oils for you. You know, you might use frankincense, for instance, because that's classed as a very royal, a very rich kind of oil. Whatever works for you. This is very adaptable. But yeah, there you go. That's a little hands-on working from myself, from a slightly more traditional witchcraft, folk medicine type of way. Neil, over to you.
Very good, Lisa. I'm about to out-basic you. So, I mean, chaos magic is a lot about sigils, and I'm sure we're going to do an episode about that at some point. But it's all about just making symbols out of your intent. So I've gone really basic and done a sigil, crafted it. That means good health, which is nice and vague for anyone. So with charging sigils in chaos magic, you can either do it by using the sigil, like just looking at it, maybe in a meditative state. You could do it whilst you're doing yoga. You could do it whilst you're doing sewing or having a bath. Or, I mean, when it comes to, say, maybe doing like sewing, you might actually sew it into wherever you're sewing, like maybe the pattern of it, or you might draw it onto yourself when you get in the bath. But then there's also a version they can do. I mean, that's known as inhibitory states. There's exhibitory states, which are more energetic and what I like, which is things like, say, you might paint it on yourself when you go out for a jog or dancing, or you might turn it into a chant or put it on a drum and beat the drum until you can't do it anymore. I mean, exhibitory is more about doing something and until you can't do it anymore. You're basically like charging the sigil while doing that. So basically I came up with the sigil. This is it. This just means good health, and you're invited to use this however you want, without all the rigmarole of how you come up with the sigil, which we'll go into at some point. So you can draw this out, use it however you want. So anything that's kind of has a personal attachment to you, I mean, might be to do with health. So it might be like meditation, yoga, taking care of yourself, having a bath, etc. But you could also do it, say, if your version of self-care is playing video games or something, you might visualize this when you're defeating the final boss. You might be doing it whilst you're doing exercise to take care of yourself. You might visualize it when you just cannot run anymore, and that's classed when you're at the peak of that. That's when it's sent out into the universe. I mean, you can go even more basic with this. You could just do what Lisa's just done. You could burn it, and you could visualize that version of good health that you want. If there's someone that's ill and you have a photograph of them, you could maybe draw this out really small and stick it to the body part that they need help with, and every time that you look at their picture, you imagine them in good health to send it their way. I mean, that's really simplifying it, but this is it. You can use this. It just means good health. If you're listening to this on audio, then we're going to include the image of the sigil on the thumbnail, so you can actually see what it's like and you can use it.
Cool. I think that's such a simplification of something that's like we're going to do a whole podcast.
I had to rein myself really in.
Did. And in fact, if you're watching this or listening to this, like, there's a whole bit that we had to cut out where Neil was being really basic for Neil, which was still 15 layers on top of, like, yeah. So again, we'll go into it in future episodes. Don't worry. Again, this year we're going to be focusing a lot more on the podcast, and we want to do little bits at the end of each episode like this, with little practical tips or little ideas that maybe we've come across that either really failed miserably for us, and we'll explain why, or things that we've really enjoyed sort of experiencing within the craft. So do stick around for that. But there will be a series, because I don't think it's even going to fit in one podcast, is it? There'll be a series of podcasts about delving into a bit more about chaos magic and how it kind of works, and how me as a folk magician would kind of integrate bits of chaos magic into my working, and also the flip side of how maybe some of my influences rubbed off on Neil a little bit.
Oh yeah, I think we're
I think
definitely.
it's a two-way street.
I think we're
We're a little bit
definitely rubbing
wavy
off
hands,
on
yeah.
each other.
Absolutely. Well, that's pretty much it from us today. If you've enjoyed watching this on the YouTubes, please go ahead and do the YouTubey things. Hit the subscribe button, ding your bell so that YouTube notifies you whenever we upload a video, and also whenever I am live streaming tarot and my other witchy videos that will be coming up in 2023. But also, I do have to say, if you are a fan of the sort of vibe that Neil puts out into the universe, do please check out the Necronomicon fanzine. If you like 80s horror, if you like those bargain basement when you used to go into Blockbusters and there'd be the bottom row and you could rent it for like 6 months for 50p, like those videos, the ones that were always on Betamax and had the really ill-fitting covers. If you like anything like that, the basket cases of the world, the sleepaway camps, all of those schlock horror films, then you've got to check out Necronomicon zine that Neil does. But he also covers like some of the good films and the modern stuff as well. But yeah, do go and check that out on Etsy. Just search for Necro Neil on Etsy. But that's going to be it from us today. Thanks for joining us on today's episode. And as we always say, keep practicing,
Keep experimenting,
and join us for the next Witchy Wednesday with. Bye-bye.